This is a complete blueprint on how to get to 1600 rating in chess within 6 months. Now, how do I know? Well, I'm a grandmaster and I've been coaching people over the last 15 years or so, and I've coached hundreds of people in person and thousands of people who went through my courses, and I'd be an idiot not to notice what works for people and how does their chess progress go. So I'm gonna share it with you so that you can make your chess progress be a straight line from where you are right now to where you wanna be, and you know exactly what you need to do in order to get there. The video will be divided in 2 parts. In the first part, we're going to cover how to get from the very beginning to the 4 digits to the 1000 chess rating, which is a nice chess goal for any chess player. And the second part will be about getting from 1000 to 1600. Therefore, the time codes are below. Feel free to skip if you are more of an intermediate player already. But I still think that if you watch it completely, that'll actually be helpful. Because even if you know lots of the beginner stuff, like knowing this information will allow you to fill in the gaps and just have more stable performance where your wins and losses don't just go up and down as well as your rating, but you have more of a stable progress. All right, let's go. So at the very beginning, obviously you learn just the rules of chess. And for an adult person, that takes 1 day. By the way, for kids who are 4-year-old, that takes 1-2 months just to get the rules of chess. So if you're an adult person, don't think that it's all lost and you should have started 30 years ago. That's not the case. You can definitely progress. All right, what do you do next? The next thing is the most important, and it is the one that is usually missed completely. That is learning the fundamental chess strategy, understanding what it's all about and actually having that sense of direction. Because what happens instead, in most of the cases, is that you're presented with a whole lot of different chess rules that you're somehow supposed to remember and follow. But we're not computers, we're not meant to operate that way. So you gotta understand, like, overall, what it's all about, which is what I call the fundamental chess strategy. So again, you probably are familiar with most of it, but still, let me share it with you. So initially, a chess game is a model of a war. We've got 2 armies, and you want to defeat the army of your opponent, and in particular to checkmate his king. All right, cool. How do you do that? Like, how do you attack black if you want to do that right away? There is just no way. You're simply standing too far away from them. Like, there is no way for your piece to go there and to start attacking something. Even if you do that, it doesn't attack anything. So that brings you to the idea that there are 2 stages of your plan, right? So the first stage of your plan is just to bring your pieces up a little bit, to deploy your forces to more active positions so that you can then attack them later. And in chess it means development, which also means putting your pieces to more active positions, in most cases within your territory, which is your half of the board, the first 4 ranks. So roughly speaking, like, your half of the board is your territory, and the other half of the board is the territory of your opponent. Therefore, within your territory, you can rearrange pieces, trying to put them on more advanced and more active positions, so that after that, they can start attacking your opponent. So ideally speaking, after an opening, you want to reach a position somewhat similar to this one. And in particular, in chess, you want to develop your pieces. Ideally, you want to make 1 move with each of them, including the king, when you castle. So develop your pieces, then you castle, which allows you to put your king to safety and also to bring your rook to the game. And finally, control the center. Now, why do you have to control the center? Well, when your piece stands closer to the center of the board, that shoots in every direction possible, and therefore you maximize the power of this piece. That's why you try to bring your pieces closer to the middle of the board, closer to those 4 central squares. You don't always can put your piece exactly in the center of the board, but you just try to keep it somewhere nearby. All right, so that's the first stage. You put your pieces to active positions, you developed it, and after that you transition to the second phase, which is you turn on your barbarian mode. You gotta start attacking, crushing, devastating, capturing, terrifying your opponents, and all that good stuff that we love so much. Just kidding. Anyway, so you want to start attacking after that. That's also one of the questions that a lot of people have. Like, what do I do after I finish my opening? Well, you start attacking. And you don't really care. As I said, you're a barbarian, right? So you don't really care. You attack anything that you can within your opponent's position. You can attack the king, great. You can capture a pawn, cool. You can capture a piece, excellent. Like, whatever you can destroy is just great, and you should do that. All right, so the point is, the more you diminish your opponent's army, the easier it will get after that. The more you'll dominate, the easier it will be to checkmate your opponent's king after that. That's why, once your pieces are already quite advanced, you start looking for pieces to move them even further to start attacking something in your opponent's position. So, for example, in this case, of course, it's an imaginary position, but just to illustrate, you could already jump with the knight forward, and now together with the bishop, you threaten to capture there, either with the bishop and checkmate black, or maybe checkmate, take it with the knight and attack the queen, attack the rook. Again, we're happy to capture anything. You gotta be greedy. Whatever you can get is great. Or you can do that with the other knight, maybe from b5, let's say. You want to do the same, capture this pawn with a knight or a bishop. So you got it. Overall, you want to move forward and attack whatever you can attack. All right, so that's number 2 stage of the game, the barbarian mode. You start attacking and devastating. Which brings us to the second key of getting to the rating of 1000, which is to learn basic openings. You don't have to dig deeply, of course, it's not that critical at this level, but knowing a few basic openings that you can follow is certainly very helpful. For example, you can just play very standard Italian game and in the simplest way possible, right, where you just develop. Now that also helps you to see exactly how you follow those generic principles. If you know that you want to develop pieces, castle, control the center, so while studying openings you see exactly how that goes in chess. And here, after you develop pieces, you don't have to go into any complications. If they attack the pawn, you can just defend it, and then you castle. Again, you play very simple chess. You try to develop a piece with every move that you play. And on the next move, you're going to develop your final minor piece, bishop, either to g5 if you can. If they play h6 and don't let you go there, you can go bishop e3 and develop it that way. And now you're playing decent chess, even if you're a 600 rated chess player. Like even masters play like that, right? So even as a beginner, you can play like that and you're playing decent chess. There's no nonsense here, and that's pretty cool. And the final third thing that you need in order to get to the rating of 1000 is to learn to notice threats and captures. It's one of the most important ones, because in this level, most of the games are decided by a blunder, where one side simply hands a piece or overlooks a checkmate. So here's a quick example, a game between two players rated 600. So I started off with a pawn a4, pawn a5. By the way, for some reason, beginners really love those side pawn movements. I guess just because it's easy to comprehend what to do there, just to march the pawn forward. Of course, you don't. We have told about that before. You want to play towards the center of the board. Anyway, so let's skip through these first moves. Now it's something already more normal. Here comes bishop g5, and that's kind of the position that I'm talking about. Whenever there is an opportunity for you to capture something, you got to be able to notice that all the time without failing, because in the current position it might be simple to notice pawn takes d5, but in other positions people miss that all the time. So in this case, instead of taking, white decided to go bishop g5, decided to go after the queen. Black covered that, and after an exchange, black recaptured with a queen, thus just blundering this pawn on d5, because it's no longer defended by the queen. And you see that computer keeps marking all these moves by, question mark, so they are questionable, and that's what happens. So white should have taken this pawn on d5 now, right? Pawn for free. Instead, he goes knight c3, which also deserves another question mark. Now, this pawn is still hanging. This time it's attacked twice by a pawn and a knight, so black has got to do something about that, right? Either push forward or take. Instead, black goes queen b4. He's pursuing some other idea. White still could have captured here. Instead, he played queen d2. All right, he wanted to neutralize the pin. Now, queen takes b2, and here white decided to finally take this pawn on d5, but that's the only case where he should have done something else, because now that hands this rook on a1. So black captures the rook. Now they're up a rook. King goes to e2. They capture a pawn, which is cool generally speaking, but in this case that is wrong because it blunders knight takes c7, which is a way for white to get the rook back and to attack the king. So as you look at game of players at lower rated levels, you can see that they hand pawns and pieces all the time, and it happens a lot more frequently than it seems because very often they miss it. Right? Just like we talked before, like the pawn is hanging on d5 and both sides just don't see it. So therefore, there are a lot more blunders than players typically are aware of. How do you train that? Well, the one classical way you're probably aware of is solving tactical puzzles. And here, the emphasis is not really on learning those different intricate tactical motifs, that is cover, check, and windmill, and whatnot, but just to learn to notice captures and attacking moves. That is it. Because you see that at this level, very often you don't have to come up with some fancy tactics or calculate a lot, but you just gotta be able to notice that a piece is hanging and you can capture it, or the opposite way, that your opponent attack your piece and you gotta do something about that, right? So that simple thing is something that you can train while solving tactical tactical puzzles, there's no need to go crazy about that and solve hundreds of them, but solving a little bit is certainly helpful. Now, to summarize, fundamentally, that is it. You gotta learn the fundamental strategy, a few basic openings, and then you learn to notice captures and threats, and that gets you to the rating of 1000. By the way, if you want me to handhold you along your journey of chess progress, let me also remind you that right now, for a few more days, you can get my new course, Level Up Your Chess. I've launched it just a couple days ago, and I've been working on it over the last roughly half a year, and I'm quite proud of it, really. I've summarized my best training techniques there, and it has a dedicated section about preventing blunders. And that one thing alone will probably get you like extra 300 rating points or so, because that's the main reason of a loss on amateur level. So if you're curious, you can click the link below the video and get the course right now with all the bonuses and discounts. Alright, so there we go with the second part, where you're gonna go from 1000 to 1600. How do you get there? Again, I've got three main keys, three main things that you gotta focus on. And the first one is to start putting more time on educational chess content versus entertainment chess content. I mean, sometimes it's fine to just have fun. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to progress, you got to learn chess. And therefore, watching someone's chess boxing or somebody challenging a famous guy with 30 extra queens and stuff like that, I mean, it's fun to watch, but that doesn't help you to progress in chess at all. Now, let me share with you what I mean. Here's a game between two amateur players. It was black to play, very standard position. Black played bishop e6. And here white noticed that there is some tension here and dropped the bishop back to b3. And this is a positional error, because that allows black to take here on b3, which he didn't, but he should have. And that disrupts white's pawn structure, and that creates weaknesses. But in order to realize that it is a problem, you got to be aware of that concept of pawn weaknesses, pawn islands, where they are split up and they become weaker, right? So white should have done something else. And instead, white played bishop b3, black also missed the opportunity and just played d5. Okay, now white traded in the middle of the board, and here white decided to attack by going c4. And while in general it is a nice thing to attack, in this particular case the bishop can easily go away, while c4 weakens this pawn on d3, which is called a backward pawn. A pawn which is no longer defended by other pawns of white, and therefore it's a long-term problem. Plus it stands on a semi-open file, and black can easily put more and more pressure against this pawn down the road. But again, in order to realize that this attacking move c4 is wrong, you gotta know that concept of a backward pawn, and you gotta learn it somehow, right? So that's what I'm talking about. You gotta start learning positional chess, because when you know how to play proper moves, that makes things a lot easier. And you're also far less likely to blunder when you don't create weaknesses and your position is safe. And the second thing that you gotta learn is you gotta learn how to attack. Because so far at lower rating levels, like, you mostly think about your position, and so you think, okay, like, I gotta develop this bishop somewhere, I gotta develop this knight somewhere, I got a castle. So you kind of think about your pieces and where can you move them. But as you advance forward, you gotta learn to attack. For example, in this case, it was actually black to play. He played bishop c5. Now, how would you play here as white? You can think about that for a couple of seconds yourself. And in the game, white realized that there's this pressure, and they traded off bishops himself on c5. And again, like, classically speaking, you gotta learn to attack, but for the Igor nation, you're not enough barbarian. You know that you want to capture, you want to terrorize your opponent, right? That's what you're gonna do in order to defeat a little bit more advanced level opponents. And in order to do that, you gotta shift your mindset, because you want to harass, capture, devastate, right? All that good stuff. And in order to do that, you got to think about your opponent now and what you can do to devastate something there. So, all right, jokes aside, so focus your attention now on your opponent's position and ask yourself, can I make some damage there? Can I capture something or attack something there? And that's, you see, a little bit shift of the way you think about it. So instead of thinking about your position, what you can do here, you now start thinking about your opponent's position and what you can do there, okay? So if you apply that method of thinking, you can easily see that there was a move, actually, bishop takes g7, which white missed, and after that, you pick up this rook on h8, and you just win the game, basically, immediately. And white player, by the way, is 1100, so is black player. So they both missed it. So that's what I'm talking about. You got to learn this new way of thinking and become more attacking player. Anyway, let's go through this move real quick. I don't dive into details, it's not all that important, so let's skip through the moves. They play more or less decent chess, they develop, so far so good. Now 95, bishop e4, 94, trade, queen e4, king c8. Alright, let me ask you once again, like, how do you play here if you're white? You can think about that for a second once again. White played rook d1 in the game, which is a decent move. But this is this little bit lower level thinking, right? Which piece should I move and where should it go? It's alright, but it's not enough barbarian, right? So you don't think about this upward looking direction, right? And you could play queen e8, checking the king and starting some massive devastation immediately. Instead, I play rook d1. Black failed to notice this thing again, and he also played rook e8. So you see that they're actually quite decent players, because Black noticed that this knight is hanging, and instead of retreating or defending it, he instead came up with a counter-attacking move, which is, generally speaking, pretty nice. But he just failed to notice that there is this queen a8 check here, and now Black is even provoking White to do so. So queen e8 was winning the game. By the way, if not queen e8, is there any other aggressive move that you can play? You can just think about that for a second. Is there any move that you can play forward in order to attack something or capture something? So I'd say that if not queen e8, at least you could capture a pawn that way on h7. That would still be better than nothing, right? At least you grab a pawn. And you know, we're barbarians again. Whatever we can capture, we're super happy. In the game, White missed both of these shots, and he played queen g4, more of a defensive chess, just offering an exchange. Black traded here, and in this case, Black also, for some reason, didn't capture this pawn. So we talked about that previously, like that you gotta really learn to notice potential captures. So instead, Black played rook e4, which was generous enough, as it actually hands the rook in one move, so that was a blunder. Even though maybe he was a Gotham subscriber who just wanted to sacrifice a rook, by all means. Anyway, after knight c4, Black resigned in a couple moves. So that's how you see how failing to notice attacking moves can cause a big difference. And the third and final piece of advice is learning to notice attacking moves from the side of your opponent, not only for yourself, but also for your opponent. That's the thing that holds a lot of people back. For example, in this case, it was Black to play. Black noticed that White is maybe wanting to take here and ruin your pawn structure. He decided to move the knight away and played knight a5. And the move itself is not a blunder, meaning that it does not hand a piece by itself, even though it hands a pawn here actually. But the problem here is that White can't play a b4 and double attack these two pieces and win one of them. So Black failed to notice that. That's what I mean by noticing attacking moves of your opponent. And you gotta apply this old wisdom to look before you leap. And before you play a move, ask yourself, what attacking moves can my opponent play? And that basically secures you from a lot of potential blunders, such as this one. Because you see that Black actually blundered two things in one move. They blundered the pawn and they blundered the piece within one move. So that's quite a bingo. And how do you do that? Oh, one of the simple ways is actually to solve tactical puzzles while looking at the position from the other side, from the losing side, so to say, right? So instead of looking at this position from White perspective, as we usually do while solving puzzles, where you gotta find this move, you turn the position around and you think about the same position, but now it is White to play. So that teaches you to notice those attacking moves from the side of your opponent. I do hope that was useful. If you have any questions, feel free to post them down below and I'll try my best to follow up. If you want me to help you along your chess journey, then feel free to click the link below the video and join the course Level Up Your Chess, which I have launched a couple of days ago, and I'll be more than happy to help you. Take care. Bye-bye.